A human knelt in the center of the grand hall, a young man, bound and bruised, defiant despite the circumstances. His face was bloodied, but his expression was anything but broken. His name was Chris Marston. Just a kid, barely out of his teens. And he was laughing. The gathered Dominion officers exchanged puzzled glances. Laughter wasn't the expected response from a conquered species. Fear, yes. Pleading, of course. But laughter? That was new. Renzer sneered, stepping forward. "Something amuses you, primate?" He said the word with deliberate disdain. Chris coughed, spat blood onto the pristine floor, and grinned. "Yeah," he said. "You idiots have no idea what you just did." Murmurs rippled through the gathered officers. Renzer's amusement soured. He dealt with countless species, all of them eventually reduced to obedient husks. The humans had fought longer than expected, but in the end, they had fallen like all the others. They were nothing special. Renzer waved a dismissive hand. "Execute him." One of the guards stepped forward, plasma rifle raised. Chris shook his head, smirking. "Seriously," he said, "you should have just left me on Earth." The shot rang out. A clean, bright pulse of energy. The young human's body slumped forward, lifeless. Renzer turned back to his officers. "There. That's how you deal with human defiance." One of his subordinates, a jittery lieutenant named Corvex, swallowed hard. "Sir," he said hesitantly, "I believe we should check his identity before broadcasting the execution." Renzer scoffed. "What does it matter? They're all the same." Corvex hesitated. "It's just, I believe this one was important." Renzer waved him off. "Then they'll know their so-called important ones die just as easily." The execution was transmitted across Dominion space, a warning to any remnants of humanity foolish enough to resist. The footage spread through the stars, reaching countless worlds. The Dominion thought it was a message of their might. They were wrong. Somewhere on the outer rim of controlled space, in a dimly lit, smoke-filled bar, Regina Marston sat nursing a whiskey. She'd never been the sentimental type, nor was she known for patience. She had the posture of a soldier who had seen too much war to believe in its glory, but was too damn stubborn to walk away from it. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, not from age, but from battle. The lines on her face weren't of weariness, but of experience. She was watching an old action movie on the bar's flickering screen. Hard to Kill, the good one. Her fingers drummed absently against the wooden counter. She wasn't retired, not officially, but the war had ended. The Dominion had won. There was nothing left to fight for. The bartender, a burly man with cybernetic implants, slid another drink her way. "On the house," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "I don't do charity." "Not charity," the bartender said grimly. "Condolences." She frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" The bartender hesitated, then tapped the screen behind him. A news broadcast was playing, Dominion propaganda, full of the usual garbage. She wasn't interested until she saw his face. Chris. Her drink stopped halfway to her lips. She stared at the image, at the smirk she knew all too well, at the blood staining his shirt. Then she watched him die. For a long moment, Regina didn't move. The bar was silent. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone knew what she was capable of. And now, every single person in that room was waiting to see what happened next. She finished her drink, exhaled slowly, and set the glass down with deliberate precision. Then she stood up, rolling her shoulders, as though shaking off the last remnants of restraint. "Where are you going?" the bartender asked. She cracked her neck. "War." Across the sector, the Dominion fleet continued its self-congratulatory festivities, completely unaware that they had just awakened something far worse than any resistance army. Regina Marston had spent decades fighting wars against impossible odds. She'd outmaneuvered warlords, dismantled empires, and broken sieges that should have lasted centuries. The Dominion had been lucky the first time. They'd fought Earth when she wasn't looking. Now they had her full attention. She stepped outside, the neon glow of the settlement casting long shadows. A small ship was docked nearby, nothing impressive, just a stolen Dominion scout vessel she'd picked up on a past job. It would do. As she approached, a figure leaned against the hull, arms crossed. "Took you long enough." Regina smirked. "Bishop," she said. "Thought you were dead." Sergeant Bishop O'Reilly, demolitions expert, professional lunatic, and conspiracy theorist extraordinaire, grinned. "Yeah, well," he said, "Dominion records ain't great, are they?" She studied him. He hadn't changed. Same rugged features, same wild glint in his eye. "You hear about Chris?" His grin faded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I heard." Regina nodded. "I need guns. I need ships. I need a damn army." Bishop scratched his chin. "Well," he said, "I don't got ships. But I know a guy." A few hours later, they stood in a back room of a dingy repair station, facing a woman who could kill a man with a spoon. Captain Sasha Red Menace Volkov had never been one for small talk. She was an ex-Spetsnaz operative with a fondness for explosives and a deep, unrelenting hatred for alien bureaucracy. Regina got straight to the point. "I need firepower." Volkov grinned, showing far too many teeth. "I have many firepowers." That was how it began. Word spread fast. The name Regina Marston wasn't just known among humans. It was feared across the galaxy. The Dominion had dismissed her as another relic of the past. They should have known better. By the time the Dominion realized something was wrong, it was too late. Regina had already hijacked a Dominion dreadnought, using a virus so outdated their advanced systems had no defenses against it. The flagship's crew found themselves staring in horror as their security feeds displayed a message written in human script. "You took my son. Now I'm taking everything." Regina stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching as alarms blared and Dominion officers scrambled. The ship was hers now. She turned to Bishop. "How fast can we get to the Dominion capital?" Bishop smirked. "Depends. You want reckless or absolutely insane?" Regina thought about it. Then she cracked her knuckles. "Both." Across the stars, Dominion leaders gathered in emergency meetings, desperately trying to understand how a single human, one lone woman, had managed to hijack a flagship. The Grand Emperor of the Dominion, Nargul the Pompous, scoffed at the reports. "This is absurd," he muttered. "She's just one human." His advisor, pale and trembling, whispered, "Sir, she's not just any human." Regina's message had been clear. She was coming, and nothing in the galaxy could stop her. The Dominion fleet drifted in the void, its commanders frozen in disbelief. The human woman, this Regina Marston, had done the unthinkable. A single operative had seized a Dominion dreadnought, their pride and joy, with nothing more than outdated Earth software and pure, unfiltered audacity. It was the kind of impossible feat that belonged in absurd human fiction, yet there it was, playing out in real time, a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. On board the captured dreadnought, Regina stood at the command deck, arms crossed, observing the chaos she had wrought. Bishop O'Reilly leaned against a console beside her, his ever-present smirk wide with amusement. Captain Volkov sat nearby, absently flipping a knife between her fingers, watching the panicked Dominion officers bound at their feet. One of the prisoners, a high-ranking communications officer named Rothzan, trembled as he stared at her. You cannot possibly expect to wage war against the entire Dominion," he stammered. "You're one woman." Regina tilted her head. "You're right," she said. "That's why I brought friends." The moment she spoke, the dreadnought's communication relays flickered, transmitting a new signal. Across the Dominion's occupied sectors, Earth's scattered resistance forces received the message. It wasn't a call for help. It was a declaration. Regina Marston was taking the war back to them. Across the galaxy, the embers of rebellion reignited. The Dominion had long believed that Earth's spirit had been crushed, that humanity was broken beyond repair. That illusion shattered in an instant. Former soldiers, ex-pilots, smugglers, and civilians who had sworn they'd never fight again all turned their eyes toward the woman who had done the impossible. Among them was Captain Diego Rodriguez, a former commercial pilot who had repurposed an old FedEx cargo hauler into something resembling a warship. He listened to the transmission and sighed. "Hell," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I knew retirement was a bad idea." Without further hesitation, he powered up his engines and set course for war. Meanwhile, deep within Dominion space, the capital world of Zakvar Prime erupted into a frenzy of bureaucratic panic. Grand Emperor Nargul sat upon his throne, his enormous gelatinous form quivering with irritation, as he read the latest reports. "You mean to tell me," he rumbled, voice thick with disdain, "that a single human has managed to inspire an entire rebellion?" His advisors, a collection of high-ranking Dominion officials, shifted uneasily. One particularly unfortunate soul stepped forward. "Your Eminence, the humans are insignificant," Nargul snapped. "We crush their world beneath our heel. Their armies are scattered. Their technology is primitive. How is it that we are losing to a widow?" His words carried a weight of disbelief, but deep beneath his fury was something even more dangerous: fear. The Dominion had crushed countless civilizations in their rise to power, yet no species had ever responded like this. The humans should have surrendered. They should have given up. Instead, they had given him Regina Marston. Aboard the captured dreadnought, Regina studied the incoming fleet readouts. The Dominion had finally acknowledged her as a threat, deploying several battle cruisers to intercept her. They were closing in fast, energy weapons primed and shields reinforced. She considered her options. "Volkov," she said, not looking up, "what do you think our odds are?" Volkov didn't hesitate. "Grim. We die bloody." Regina nodded, then turned to Bishop. "Thoughts?" Bishop grinned. "I got a stupid idea." Regina sighed. "Perfect. Let's hear it." Moments later, the Dominion fleet prepared to engage, their admirals already celebrating their imminent victory. The human warship, a single stolen vessel, stood no chance against their overwhelming firepower. The battle was already won, until, without warning, the dreadnought's distress beacon activated. The Dominion fleet hesitated as their own warship, the one Regina had stolen, sent out a universal distress signal. Dominion protocols dictated an automatic response. "Attention, Dominion forces," the dreadnought's automated systems blared. "We have suffered catastrophic failure. Requesting emergency boarding assistance." It was such an obvious ruse that any competent commander should have dismissed it immediately. Unfortunately, Dominion commanders were not particularly competent. The fleet hesitated. Confusion rippled through their ranks. It made no sense. Why would an enemy warship request boarding? What kind of fool would call for reinforcements in the middle of an attack? Regina counted the seconds. Then, at the perfect moment, she activated Phase 2 of Bishop's idiotic plan. The moment the Dominion boarding crews docked with the dreadnought, Regina fired the ship's thrusters at full power, jerking the vessel into an uncontrolled spiral. The sudden movement caused several boarding ships to crash into the Dominion's own cruisers, their docking ports tangled in a catastrophic mess of metal and panic. In the ensuing confusion, Regina targeted the Dominion's lead battleship and fired every weapon she had. Plasma beams tore through the Dominion fleet, their ships scrambling to reposition. The dreadnought was supposed to be an easy target, an already lost vessel. Now, it was a weaponized nightmare in the hands of the galaxy's most relentless mother. Explosions rippled through the Dominion forces. Volkov hooped, Bishop cackled, and Regina grinned. "Remind me," she said, "why they thought they could win this war." Bishop fired a shot at an incoming fighter. "Because they have numbers. We just have guts." The battle ended in chaos. The Dominion fleet, unable to recover from the absurdity of the engagement, withdrew to regroup. Regina didn't bother chasing them down. She had a bigger target. She set course for Renzer's homeworld. By the time she arrived, word had spread. The planet's defenses were on high alert, anticipating a full-scale attack. The skies were littered with warships, orbital cannons primed for planetary defense. Regina didn't use brute force. She used something much worse: stealth. Under the cover of a Dominion supply shipment, she and her team infiltrated the capital. Renzer, the arrogant commander who had started this war by executing her son, remained blissfully unaware that his doom had already landed on his doorstep. Regina moved through the city with quiet efficiency, Bishop and Volkov at her side. They blended into the chaos, disguised in stolen Dominion uniforms. It wasn't hard. Dominion officers were bureaucratic, pompous, and easily distracted. Their destination was Renzer's personal compound, a fortress of arrogance built on the backs of conquered worlds. He lived in excess, surrounded by luxury, while those under his rule suffered. Regina took one look at the ostentatious display of wealth and decided she hated him even more. Getting inside was easy. Dominion security relied on scanners and biometric locks, all of which could be bypassed with a few well-placed explosives. They found Renzer in his private chambers, lounging on a throne made from what looked like human relics, old Earth artifacts, trophies from his conquests. Regina saw a battered American flag hanging on the wall, and something inside her snapped. Renzer barely had time to register the threat before Regina struck. She moved like a force of nature, her fist connecting with his jaw before he could cry out. He tumbled from his throne, scrambling backward. "You," he gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. "You can't be here." Regina cracked her knuckles. "Oh, I'm very here." Renzer reached for a weapon, but Volkov's knife was already at his throat. Bishop leaned against the wall, grinning. "This is the part where you beg," he said cheerfully. Renzer sneered. "You think killing me will stop the Dominion? You're a fool." Regina leaned in close, her voice dangerously soft. "Oh, I'm not going to kill you," she said. "I want you to deliver a message." Renzer swallowed. What message?" Regina smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Tell your emperor I'm coming, and I'm bringing hell with me." She stood, nodded to Volkov, and without hesitation, they detonated half the fortress. As the smoke rose behind them, the Dominion's forces scrambled to react. But it was too late. The war had begun, and Regina Marston was just getting started. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy with absolute certainty. Their power was unquestioned, their might unparalleled. No world had ever risen once it had been conquered. No species had ever survived their crushing grasp. Until now, Regina Marston had turned the galaxy on its head. In the wake of her assault on Renzer's homeworld, Dominion intelligence agencies scrambled to track her movements. Every surveillance drone, every planetary checkpoint, every fleet patrol was suddenly on high alert. The bounty on her head rose to obscene levels. She was declared an enemy of the state, a terrorist, a ghost. The Dominion broadcast her image across every known system with a single warning: kill her on sight. Regina had never been prouder. She sat in the pilot's seat of her stolen dreadnought, now renamed the Vengeance, watching the galaxy unravel through intercepted transmissions. The Dominion's panic was practically tangible. For the first time in history, they weren't the ones issuing ultimatums. They were the ones desperately trying to hold onto control. Bishop O'Reilly leaned against the console, arms crossed, an amused grin tugging at his lips. "You hear that?" he said, pointing to one of the intercepted Dominion transmissions. "They're calling you the Butcher of Zakvar." Regina raised an eyebrow. "Butcher? Please." That was barely an appetizer. Volkov, ever the pragmatist, checked her weapons with precise efficiency. "They're scared. But scared enemies do stupid things." Regina tapped the console, bringing up the next phase of her plan. The Dominion had been reactionary, trying to stomp out the rebellion as if it were a brush fire. What they didn't realize was that she had already spread the flames. Throughout the galaxy, human forces were rising. Resistance cells that had been in hiding for years now surfaced, emboldened by the fact that someone had struck the first blow. Ships once used for smuggling and piracy now bore the insignia of a newly reborn Earth Liberation Front. Former soldiers rearmed. Civilian engineers modified industrial equipment into weapons. Human ingenuity turned scrapyards into war factories. The Dominion had spent so long underestimating humans that they had no idea what was coming. Diego Rodriguez, one of the first to answer Regina's call, had been gathering his own forces in the outer systems. He sent a message to the Vengeance, appearing on screen with a lopsided grin. "So, I hear you're causing problems." Regina smirked. "Thought I'd liven things up." Rodriguez shook his head. "You didn't just liven things up. You kicked a hornet's nest with a rocket launcher. Every major Dominion fleet in the sector is looking for you. Good, Regina said simply. I want their attention. Rodriguez hesitated. We've got ships. We've got soldiers. But we don't have a fleet strong enough to take them head on. Bishop interjected, grinning. That's where we get creative. Regina had no interest in fighting the Dominion on their terms. A direct war would be suicide, even with the growing resistance. But war wasn't just about firepower. It was about strategy. It was about exploiting weaknesses. And the Dominion's greatest weakness was their arrogance. The first strike was at their supply lines. Human raiding parties, once mere pirates struggling for survival, now operated with surgical precision. Dominion convoys disappeared into the void, their resources redirected to human forces. Entire manufacturing plants on occupied worlds mysteriously exploded overnight. Infrastructure crumbled under the weight of sabotage and misinformation. And then there was the Fist of Nargol. The Dominion's pride and joy, a planet-sized war station capable of wiping out entire civilizations, had been deployed as the ultimate deterrent against rebellion. The massive structure orbited a Dominion-controlled world. Its presence alone meant to instill terror. Regina saw it as an opportunity. She had spent her life fighting wars. She knew that no system, no matter how advanced, was without its vulnerabilities. And in this case, the war station had a very particular flaw. It relied on an artificial intelligence system for logistical operations, which meant it could be hacked. Regina contacted a specialist, Teddy Glitch Lawson, a teenage hacker who had evaded Dominion capture for years by sheer wit and a deep love for outdated Earth programming. When the encrypted message from the Vengeance arrived, he nearly choked on his soda. Wait, the Regina Marston, he muttered, pushing aside a half-eaten bag of chips as he read the details of the mission. Oh man, this is some next-level Star Wars stuff. Regina's message was simple. Shut down the Fist of Nargol. Cause as much chaos as possible. Teddy cracked his knuckles. Lady, you just gave me the best homework assignment ever. What followed was an act of sheer digital vandalism that would go down in history. The Dominion had built their AI on cold logic and efficiency. Teddy turned it into a malfunctioning mess of absurdity. The war station's automated defense grid started mistaking Dominion vessels for enemies. Its targeting systems demanded unnecessary password changes every 60 seconds. At one point, it rerouted an emergency fleet deployment because it was convinced it had a pizza delivery en route. When the Dominion fleet finally realized something was wrong, it was too late. Regina's forces struck, taking advantage of the confusion. The mighty Fist of Nargol exploded from within, a victim of its own hubris. The galaxy took notice. Dominion control fractured. Once loyal governors started questioning the Empire's authority. Other conquered species, long believing resistance was futile, suddenly saw hope. The humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. The Grand Emperor's rage was beyond anything his subordinates had ever seen. He lashed out at his own officers, ordering mass purges, desperate to maintain control. But fear had already seeped into the foundation of his empire. And in the middle of it all was Regina Marston, the most wanted human in the galaxy. The Dominion tried everything to stop her. They sent assassins. She sent them back in pieces. They deployed propaganda, claiming she was a war criminal. She hijacked their broadcasts and turned it into a stand-up routine. They even tried bribery, offering her entire worlds in exchange for surrender. She didn't even dignify it with a response. For Regina, this was never about conquest. It was never about building an empire of her own. It was about one thing and one thing only: vengeance. And there was only one person left on her list. Grand Emperor Nargol. His throne world, Draxia Prime, was the most heavily defended planet in the Dominion. A direct assault would be suicidal, which is why Regina didn't attack it. She infiltrated it. Under the cover of a stolen diplomatic vessel, she landed on the capital world, slipping through their security nets with the ease of a veteran operative. Bishop and Volkov followed, their movements silent, precise. They had done this before many times. but never on this scale. They moved through the palace corridors like wraiths, eliminating guards with ruthless efficiency. Regina had only one destination, the throne room. The moment she entered, Nargul knew. He was vast, a bloated monstrosity of a being, his gelatinous form rippling with rage. He had once thought himself untouchable. Now, as Regina Marston stepped forward, plasma rifle in hand, he felt something new. Terror. "You," he hissed. "Me," Regina said. He tried to summon guards, but none came. His security forces were already dead. He tried to reason with her, but she wasn't interested in words. "You killed my son," she said. "And you thought I'd let that go." Nargul sneered. "You're just a—" She shot him. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. The Grand Emperor of the Dominion, ruler of countless worlds, fell without ceremony, his bloated form slumping to the ground. Regina stood over him, silent. Then she picked up his crown, turned to Bishop and Volkov, and said, "Let's finish this." The war wasn't over, but it was about to be. The Dominion was crumbling. With the death of Grand Emperor Nargul, the heart of their empire had rotted from within. What had once been an unshakable force now faltered, its chains of control snapping link by link. Governors who once cowered in absolute loyalty now saw an empire weakened, divided. The fear that had kept entire star systems in check was gone, replaced with something far worse: hope. And hope was contagious. Regina Marston had given the galaxy something it hadn't seen in centuries: a reason to fight back. She stood atop the ruins of the Dominion throne room, the lifeless husk of Nargul still oozing across the marble floors behind her. The air smelled of scorched metal, burned flesh, and the acrid sting of plasma discharge. The war wasn't over, but its direction had changed. She had torn off the head of the beast. Now, she just needed to make sure the body stopped moving. Bishop O'Reilly was beside her, reloading his shotgun with a smirk. "Well," he said, snapping a fresh shell into place, "I'd say that went smoother than expected." Volkov, leaning against a shattered column, wiped blood from a knife before tucking it back into her belt. Could have been quieter. Regina surveyed the wreckage around her. The Dominion's final stronghold had fallen in a blaze of fire and chaos. Every calculated step, every attack, every risk had led to this moment. She didn't have an army. She had a handful of the most dangerous humans in the galaxy, and that had been enough. But the Dominion was nothing if not stubborn. A transmission flickered across the remains of the throne room's command console, a desperate, static-laced voice cutting through the destruction. "This is Fleet Admiral Krovnak of the Dominion First Armada," the voice growled. "Marston, you've gone too far. Stand down now, or we will reduce this planet to ashes." Regina rolled her shoulders, exhaustion biting at the edges of her consciousness. But she pushed it down. "Bishop," she said, without looking at him, "how many ships do we have?" Bishop frowned, glancing at the data stream they had intercepted. Counting the stolen dreadnoughts, the rogue Dominion defectors, and Rodriguez's scavenger fleet? Not nearly enough. Figures. She cracked her knuckles, stretching out the tension. "What are they bringing?" Volkov's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up the enemy fleet's readout. "Everything," she said flatly. The Dominion had thrown every remaining warship they had into the fight. Dozens of dreadnoughts, battleships, and planetary siege platforms now moved into formation above Draxia Prime, ready to unleash devastation upon their own capital world rather than let it fall into human hands. It was the kind of last-ditch insanity Regina respected, the kind of insanity she was prepared for. She pressed a button on her wrist communicator, activating an open channel to every resistance fighter, every pilot, every soldier who had thrown their lot in with her. Across the system, on stolen Dominion ships, on retrofitted human freighters, in the cockpits of rusted fighters held together by nothing more than stubbornness. Her people listened. "This is Marston," she said. "We knew this wouldn't end quietly. They're throwing everything at us because they're afraid. And they should be." She paused, glancing at the crimson glow of the Dominion fleet descending toward them like a swarm of locusts. "They killed our people. They burned our world. They took everything they could from us and expected us to thank them for it. But they made one mistake. They thought we'd stay down. Her fingers tightened into a fist. They took my son. Now I take their empire. Give ML. The transmission cut, and the fleet surged forward. The battle that followed would be remembered for generations. It started in the upper atmosphere, where the Dominion warships moved in formation, precise and calculated. Against them came a force that should not have been able to win, a ragtag assembly of rebels, smugglers, defectors, and vengeance-driven humans flying ships that had no right to still be operational. Rodriguez led the first charge, his fleet of repurposed freighters punching through Dominion formations in an unrelenting storm of firepower. The Dominion had size and technology on their side, but humans had unpredictability and madness. Teddy Lawson, their resident teenage hacker, had rigged half the Dominion ships with software failures before the battle even started. The largest Dominion dreadnought, the Emperor's Wrath, found itself locked in an unresponsive loop of playing elevator music, while its weapons refused to fire. Ground forces fought in the streets of the capital, where Dominion loyalists clashed with human insurgents in brutal, chaotic warfare. Regina led the charge personally, her rifle a blur of movement, her strikes surgical, efficient. She didn't have time for mercy. Not anymore. Explosions ripped through the sky as Dominion warships fell, their once mighty formations fracturing under the sheer tenacity of the human assault. The battle was less a clash of equals and more a test of endurance, of which side could hold out longer. Regina had no intention of outlasting them. She intended to end them. She spotted the flagship of Admiral Krovnock in the center of the battle, its massive, obsidian hull a testament to the Dominion's arrogance. She turned to Volkov. How hard would it be to get aboard that thing? Volkov arched an eyebrow. You want an honest answer or a Marston answer? Regina smirked. You already know. The insertion was reckless, dangerous, and exactly what she wanted. Using one of the stolen Dominion shuttles, they punched a hole through the flagship's defense grid, crashing directly into its main docking bay. Before the alarms could even blare, they were already moving. The halls of the flagship were a storm of fire and chaos. Regina tore through the corridors like a force of nature, every Dominion soldier that stood in her path falling before they could even raise their weapons. Bishop covered their rear, laying down suppressive fire, while Volkov sliced through security barriers with a practiced efficiency. They reached the bridge in record time. Krovnock stood at the command console, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. You, he spat. Me, Regina said. He reached for his weapon. She shot him before he could touch it. The bridge descended into panic as the remaining officers scrambled, unsure whether to fight or surrender. Regina made the decision for them, stepping over Krovnock's lifeless body and slamming a command override into the terminal. This is Marston, she announced across the Dominion fleet's secure channel. Your leader is dead. Your capital is ours. Your empire is over. Silence. Then, one by one, Dominion warships began shutting down their weapons. Some fled outright, jumping to light speed with no intention of looking back. The battle wasn't just lost. The Dominion was lost, and Regina Marston had won. She stepped away from the terminal, exhaling slowly. Bishop clapped her on the shoulder, his usual smirk softened by something almost resembling respect. Damn, he said. Never seen an empire fall so fast. Volkov surveyed the view beyond the bridge window, where the remnants of the battle flickered in the darkness. What now? She asked. Regina considered the question. The war was over. The Dominion was finished. But peace? That was another battle entirely. She looked down at the blood on her hands, the blood of those who had taken everything from her, the blood of those who had followed her into this madness, the blood of a war that had never truly ended. She turned back to her crew, to the people who had stood by her through it all. We rebuild, she said simply. We make damn sure this never happens again. And for the first time in a long time, Regina Marston allowed herself to breathe.